On July 20th, 1973, Bruce Lee died tragically at the age of 32. The official cause of death, a fatal reaction to aspirin.
Bruce Lee, the global icon who transformed martial arts and cinema forever, was just 32 years old when he collapsed at the Hong Kong apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei and never regained consciousness. Over the years, there have been countless conspiracy theories, ranging from mafia assassinations to mystical death strikes. However, decades later, thanks to modern medical research, the Bruce Lee death mystery has finally been solved, and it's not good. So how can a seemingly healthy man at the peak of physical prowess collapse and die like that? Today, we'll unveil everything. Bruce Lee's final day. On July 20th, 1973, Bruce Lee, already a global martial arts icon at the age of 32, spent what would be his final day in Hong Kong. He was actively working on his film Game of Death, a project he had originally begun in 1972 but had paused to film Enter the Dragon, the movie that would later catapult him to international superstardom. On that Friday afternoon, he visited the apartment of 26-year-old Taiwanese actress Betty Ting Pei, located at 67 Beacon Hill Road in Kowloon Tong. Betty was not only Lee's co-star in Game of Death, but also widely rumored to be involved with him romantically. Raymond Chow, the founder of Golden Harvest Studios and a close associate of Lee's, had been with both Bruce and Betty earlier in the day. They were going over the script for Game of Death and finalizing production decisions. Chow left in the early evening for a dinner meeting, leaving Lee and Betty alone. According to later accounts given by both Betty and Chow, Bruce began to experience a headache around 7:30 p.m. and asked for something to relieve the pain. Betty provided him with one tablet of Equagesic, a prescription painkiller that combined aspirin. After taking the tablet, Bruce decided to lie down and rest in Betty's bedroom. He would never wake up. When Betty tried to wake him later and he failed to respond, she became alarmed. Around 9 p.m., she contacted Chow, who returned immediately and attempted to revive Lee, but found him unresponsive. Emergency medical services were called, and Lee was transported to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival at 11:30 p.m. The autopsy revealed that Bruce Lee's brain had swollen considerably, from its normal weight of about 1,400 grams to 1,275 grams, an increase of approximately 13%, which is consistent with cerebral edema. The medical examiners determined that the edema was likely caused by a hypersensitive reaction to Equagesic, particularly the meprobamate component. The cause of death was officially classified as death by misadventure. However, doubts quickly emerged about the Equagesic explanation. Bruce Lee had taken the same medication before without incident, and the dosage found in his system was not by any means excessive. This inconsistency led to a range of alternative theories over the years. Theories also surfaced about the place of his death. Relationship with Betty Ting Pei. In the wake of Bruce Lee's untimely death on July 20th, 1973, intense media attention turned toward Taiwanese actress Betty Ting Pei, who was the last person to see him alive. At the time, Betty was 26 years old and living at 67 Beacon Hill Road in the upscale Kowloon Tong district of Hong Kong. Betty was a contract actress with Golden Harvest Studios, the same company that produced Bruce Lee's films. She had starred in several martial arts and romantic dramas throughout the late 1960s and early 70s and was cast in a supporting role for Game of Death, the film Bruce was working on in his final days. Their professional relationship soon drew speculation of something deeper. Numerous sources in the Hong Kong entertainment industry claimed the two were romantically involved, though the affair was kept secret from the public and denied by many close to Lee. However, others, most notably Raymond Chow, Lee's friend and business partner at Golden Harvest, confirmed in later interviews that the two shared more than just a working relationship. After Bruce's death, the press was relentless in pursuing the truth behind their association. The fact that he died in Betty's apartment, rather than at home with his wife, Linda Lee Caldwell, was odd, of course. At the time of Bruce's death, his family was in Hong Kong, but not with him. In the immediate aftermath, the Hong Kong media followed Betty relentlessly, and international outlets picked up the story, turning 67 Beacon Hill Road into a symbol of celebrity scandal. The actress went into seclusion and later suffered a mental health breakdown, according to interviews she gave in the 1980s and early 2000s. She maintained that she did not kill Bruce, and that the events of that evening were deeply traumatic for her. In a rare interview years later, Betty revealed that she and Bruce had indeed shared a very special relationship, though she avoided confirming a full-fledged affair. In any case, Betty's name would forever be tied to Bruce Lee's legacy. But wait, there's more to the story. Role of Equagesic and immediate medical response. Equagesic, the medication that Bruce Lee took to numb his pain, is a prescription painkiller that was fairly common at the time. This particular substance was a compound medication combining aspirin, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, and meprobamate, a muscle relaxant and tranquilizer used to treat anxiety and tension. It was not known to be dangerous when taken in standard doses, and Lee had used the medication on earlier occasions without any adverse reaction. After swallowing the tablet, Bruce told Betty he was going to lie down and rest in her bedroom. He entered the room and shut the door behind him. According to Betty, hours passed, and Bruce remained asleep, or so she thought. When she attempted to wake him, he did not respond. Alarmed, she phoned Raymond Chow, who returned to the apartment and also tried unsuccessfully to rouse Lee. Recognizing that something was seriously wrong, Betty and Chow called for medical help. A doctor was summoned to the scene, and Bruce was soon transported to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Despite attempts at resuscitation, Bruce Lee was declared dead on arrival at 11:30 p.m. that night. Bruce Lee was just 32 years old and at the peak of his physical prowess and cinematic career. An autopsy was ordered and conducted by pathologist Dr. Wu in the days that followed. The examination revealed that Lee's brain had swollen significantly. The swelling was so severe that it impeded normal brain function and resulted in a fatal loss of consciousness. Toxicology reports confirmed the presence of Equagesic in Bruce's system, but there was no sign of an overdose. The quantity ingested was within the therapeutic range and not considered lethal. Nevertheless, the official cause of death, as announced by the Hong Kong coroner's office, was death by misadventure, as in the ingestion of Equagesic. The fatal consequence was determined to be a hypersensitive reaction to one of its components, likely the tranquilizer meprobamate, which can rarely trigger cerebral edema in sensitive individuals. Despite the coroner's findings, many of Bruce's associates and fans were skeptical of the conclusion. They questioned how a substance he had taken before without issue could suddenly prove fatal. Further, Bruce had experienced a similar medical emergency just 2 months earlier on May 10, 1973, when he collapsed in a dubbing studio in Hong Kong while working on post-production for Enter the Dragon. At that time, he also complained of a headache and became unresponsive. He was rushed to the hospital and successfully revived. The diagnosis then was also cerebral edema, though the underlying cause was never definitively identified. The core findings of the 1973 autopsy remain a foundation for all subsequent theories. The brain swelling was real, the dose of Equagesic was low, and there was no evidence of injury or substance overdose. These contradictions have led to persistent uncertainty. While the coroner's verdict provided a legal closure to the case, it left open a vast interpretive space that has since been filled with both scientific inquiry and cultural speculation. As such, the inconsistencies within the autopsy findings continue to shape the enduring mystery surrounding Bruce Lee's death. A mystery rooted in hard data, but not yet met with a universally accepted explanation. So, what are the possibilities? Alternate theories over the years. Over the decades since Bruce Lee's untimely death, a series of alternate theories have emerged, attempting to explain the mysterious and sudden nature of his demise. One prominent hypothesis rooted in Bruce's prior health episodes involves the possibility of SUDEP, or sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. SUDEP refers to unexplained, non-traumatic deaths in epilepsy patients who are otherwise healthy. Though Bruce was never officially diagnosed with epilepsy, the collapse in May 1973, which included symptoms such as headache, seizures, and loss of consciousness, raised red flags for some neurologists. He was briefly hospitalized at Baptist Hospital in Kowloon and treated for cerebral edema at the time, only to recover and resume work. The repetition of similar symptoms 2 months later lends support to the SUDEP hypothesis. If Bruce had a form of undiagnosed focal epilepsy, it could explain the sudden nature of his collapse and the lack of prior warning signs. Beyond these medically grounded explanations, more sensational theories have also circulated. Among the most enduring is the claim that Bruce Lee was assassinated by members of the Hong Kong Triads, an organized criminal syndicate with known influence in the film industry during the 1970s. According to this theory, Lee had refused to pay protection money or had crossed certain underworld figures, prompting a calculated act of revenge via poisoning. However, no forensic evidence from the autopsy supports the presence of toxins or foreign substances beyond the standard dose of Equigesic. Moreover, Hong Kong police and forensic investigators never uncovered credible leads. Even more fantastical is the enduring martial arts legend that Bruce died from a dim mak, or death touch, an ancient concept from Chinese martial arts lore that describes a delayed death resulting from a precise strike to specific pressure points. This myth was popularized in martial arts circles and some kung fu films of the late 20th century. However, no medical evidence or biological mechanism supports the existence of such a phenomenon. So, what was it? Well, the last person to see him alive has some insights. Betty Ting Pei's later statements. In the years following the sudden and widely publicized death of Bruce Lee in her Kowloon Tong apartment at 67 Beacon Hill Road, Betty Ting Pei spoke out in several interviews, offering what she described as her truth in the face of intense public scrutiny. In a 2006 radio interview, Betty Ting admitted that she and Bruce Lee had been lovers for more than a year before his death. This stark acknowledgement contrasted with earlier ambiguity and confirmed decades of speculation. However, by 2013, 40 years after Bruce Lee's passing, she clarified that while they had an intimate relationship, they did not engage in any amorous activity on the day of his death, a distinction that shaped public understanding of the events of July 20, 1973. Betty eventually broke her decades-long silence in a TVB documentary aired in August 2025. She described Bruce arriving at her apartment around 5 p.m., complaining of a headache at 7 p.m., taking a headache pill she provided, and then lying down. When he did not awaken for a planned dinner with Raymond Chow, she panicked and called for help. Notably, she was instructed to wait for Raymond before calling an ambulance, which she did once she realized the severity of the situation. This was likely done to minimize scandal. Raymond Chow, Bruce Lee's longtime business partner and head of Golden Harvest Studios, was deeply invested in Lee's career and public image. Since Bruce was found unconscious in Betty's apartment, a woman rumored to be his mistress, Chow may have feared the media fallout, especially in conservative Hong Kong society. By arriving first, Chow could assess the situation, control information, and potentially shield both Bruce's family and the studio from reputational damage. It was a calculated move, though ethically questionable, intended to buy time and ensure that any official statements would not ignite controversy before the full facts were known. Unfortunately, the delay may have also contributed to enduring suspicion and conspiracy theories about what really happened that day. Across interviews, Betty has consistently denied any intentional wrongdoing or responsibility, asserting repeatedly, "They said I poisoned him, but it was just a headache pill. Why am I the one blamed?" She noted that both she and her own mother had taken the same medication, Equagesic, without issue, emphasizing that she did not manufacture the substance and had no way to foresee such a reaction. The tragic spotlight turned harsh when Betty became a target of public outrage. In interviews, she described the years following Bruce's death as a nightmare. "I was only 26, a young woman. I felt everyone wanted me to die," she said during a 2003 interview marking the 30th anniversary of his death. She disclosed receiving death threats and cruel accusations, leading her to live in fear and long periods of self-imposed seclusion. Adding further personal depth, Betty shared profound psychological trauma. She said, "Whenever I see someone sleeping, I would check if they're dead, even now." The unresolved guilt and constant scrutiny had left lasting scars. She added, "What could I have done? I didn't invent them. Why do people insist on blaming me?" Even amid controversy, Betty demonstrated respect for Bruce's family, particularly his widow, Linda Lee. Testimony from the time of Bruce's funeral recounts Betty, heavily distressed, stating softly that Linda was the only one who should be mourning publicly, and that she respected her space by remaining out of sight. This respectful yet painful gesture contrasted sharply with how she had been vilified by public discourse. Betty's later public involvement included a 2003 announcement of her plans to write an autobiography. A 2006 radio interview confirmed her romantic relationship with Bruce, and in 2015, on the 42nd anniversary of his death, she published the biography The Best Time with Bruce Lee, reflecting on their connection and the events leading up to his death. Through all of this, Betty Ting Pei's statements have remained consistent. She acknowledged an intimate bond with Bruce Lee, insisted earnestly that she never intended harm, explained that she had administered medication at his request after he complained of a headache, and repeatedly described the psychological trauma inflicted by decades of blame and condemnation. So, is she telling the truth? Well, yes. She had absolutely no motive for harming Lee in her own apartment, of all places. So, what was it that killed the legend? Well, let's reveal the actual culprit. The Bruce Lee death mystery has been finally solved. A 2022 study, published in the Clinical Kidney Journal by a team of kidney specialists associated with the Fundación Jiménez Díaz in Madrid, proposes that Lee succumbed to cerebral edema due to hyponatremia, a condition arising from dangerously low sodium levels in the blood. They hypothesized that his kidneys were unable to excrete excess water, leading to fluid buildup in the brain and death within a matter of hours. This explanation aligns precisely with the known timeline of Lee's collapse. Reports from contemporaries indicate that he frequently consumed large amounts of water, sometimes replacing solid foods entirely with juices or smoothies, creating a fluid-heavy, low-solute diet. Compounding this, He used substance known to increase thirst and encourage further fluid consumption. Such behaviors, combined with strenuous physical exertion, may have disrupted normal fluid balance and created a perfect storm for hyponatremia. Further factors likely impaired his body's ability to manage fluid. Prescription medicines, including diuretics, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory substances, such as components of equagesic and others, can interfere with kidney water excretion or promote secretion of antidiuretic hormone. Lee was known to have taken equagesic immediately before collapsing, though this was not in overdose amounts. The Clinical Kidney Journal paper emphasizes that while equagesic may have served as a trigger, the root problem was a systemic inability to expel excess water, not substance toxicity alone. Further lending weight to this hypothesis is the aforementioned May 10, 1973 incident when Lee collapsed during a dubbing session and received a cerebral edema diagnosis after being rushed to Baptist Hospital in Kowloon. That episode, now viewed in retrospect, may have been an early indicator of a recurring imbalance, possibly a precursor to the lethal hyponatremia culminating in his death 2 months later. Moreover, the significance of the timeline cannot be overstated. The autopsy revealed a brain weight of 1,575 grams, approximately a 13% increase from the typical 1,400 grams, signifying severe swelling. Hyponatremia-induced cerebral edema is one of the few conditions consistent with both such swelling and the acute onset, returning Lee to unconsciousness shortly after drinking fluids and resting. Most notably, Matthew Polly, Bruce Lee's acclaimed biographer, publicly supported the hyponatremia theory as the most likely cause of Bruce Lee's death. In interviews following the publication of the 2022 peer-reviewed study in the Clinical Kidney Journal, Polly stated that the theory aligned with years of accumulated evidence and fit well with Bruce's known lifestyle and health patterns. Polly had already noted in his 2018 biography, Bruce Lee: A Life, that Bruce consumed large volumes of water, often avoided solid food, and had a history of collapsing under similar conditions in May 1973. While he originally leaned toward heat stroke as a possible cause, he later acknowledged that hyponatremia offered a more medically precise explanation. So, here's what happened. Bruce Lee's intense water consumption combined with low dietary salutes and pharmacological influences impaired his kidneys' ability to regulate fluid. This led to dilutional hyponatremia and consequent brain swelling. The equagesic pill was not the primary culprit, but rather a catalyst amid multiple physiological vulnerabilities. Based on this evidence, it appears that Bruce Lee most likely died of cerebral edema induced by hyponatremia, with environmental stressors and his famous last pill serving as accelerants. Betty Ting Pei is innocent of any wrongdoing in the death of Bruce Lee. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.